All right, so Dr. Burns, superintendent with Copperas Cove ISD, and appreciate you letting me come on in today and talk to you about this bond. I know you personally haven't spoken a lot about it. The Facilities Corporation or Commission, of course, has pitched it to the voters, which is their job. But I just want to talk to you about just some numbers and some facts about the bond. So, what has been laid out from the Facilities Commission and proposed in the bond, how would these improve the district overall?
Well, there's some challenges that we've had that we've not been able to address through normal funding processes. And so we've spent about $50 million over the last 12 years replacing HVAC units, modernizing campuses, renovating the the Fairview side of Fairview Miss Jewel, things like that. But we've gotten to a point where there's some bigger ticket items that we just don't have the resources in normal budget to be able to fulfill. One of the biggest challenges we have in Copperas Cove is high school. High school's a big high school, not a huge high school. The largest 6A high school in the state is Allen ISD with over 5,000 students. They're also one of the highest performing high schools across the nation, not just in Texas. But we have some work that we need to do there. We've heard from parents and from students over the years that it's crowded and we need more room and things like that. And so when the Facilities Committee began their work in November of 2021, they took on a huge task. They visited almost every campus, looked at almost every facility. They got to go behind doors and closed doors and hallways where people don't normally go. And they got to look at both the infrastructure of the buildings and the actual structure and how it's being used. And so they've also listened to concerns, and they said, hey, there's some things that probably need to be done. One of them is need to figure out a way to try to make that high school more useful and user-friendly for kids. And also make sure that we have enough room there for the staff that are on that campus to provide services. So a big part of their recommendation to the board was to go in and renovate the high school. That renovation includes the flipping of that campus where the main entrance then begins to face Avenue D. New cafeteria is added on the current entrance where the current entrance is, and then there's the addition of about 55 classrooms there. Specifically, the architect worked with the committee and they designed hallways that were committed to kids by grade level. So there's a freshman hallway, there's a sophomore hallway, there's a junior hallway, there's a senior hallway. And for the vast majority of a student's day, they would spend time in that hallway, traveling between teachers, classes, and subjects.
So very similar to how the junior high is currently set up.
Kind of. And they would not mix much unless they were going to fine arts wing or they were going to athletics, and that's where we'd see the mix take place. Well, that would alleviate some of our choke points. We went in about 4 years ago and widened the hallway at the small commons. That still is a choke point where we see kids come in, even though the width of that hallway was tripled, it still becomes an area where kids congregate. So by dividing those kids up into hallways and them staying in that hallway for the majority of their day, that will alleviate a lot of the crowding that takes place in some of the choke points on the high school campus. The other thing, with the addition of 55 classrooms that addresses an issue, is we have about 30 teachers at the high school who transition every class period. We call them traveling teachers. They don't have a homeroom because there's not enough rooms for them. So they either travel using a cart or a buggy system or a backpack system, and they may travel from classroom 301 to classroom 307 to classroom 219 and over to classroom 128, and so they're moving every day. Part of that clogs up the hallway too when you have 30 teachers traveling with all their goods in tow. And many times those kids are following those teachers. So it just doesn't create for good flow. In the new high school renovation plan, there's some areas where that high school gets widened out. There's some areas that we create some different commons areas for kids so they're not congregated all in the same area. And so that's the big chunk of the high school renovation. The other one addresses security. Safety and security is an issue that we've always tried to address here, but some of the new mandates coming from the state change or modify how we handle security issues. So we would like to create what we consider a school side or a safe side of the campus where every guest or anyone who wants to enter the campus can access, because we don't know who's coming on that campus necessarily. So we're trying to move some things for better parking and for better accessibility to the front side of that campus, what is now the front side of the campus, and give access for parents who want to come and watch a kid play tennis, or they want to come and watch them play baseball or softball. And then we want to create some restricted areas where we know that during the school day, we've got kids behind protective perimeters, that we have access control for folks who are wanting to enter those areas of the campus. Just like the new CT building is built behind the band hall. Right now we have a courtesy booth attendant out there, but we don't really have any other way, if someone enters that campus by some modality other than driving, of mediating that, trying to keep people out of there. So you'll see fencing come into play. Okay. We'll use some electronic devices to help us with security, monitor doors and do things like that. That's a big part of what's in the bond, and that actually impacts every campus across the district. We will deploy a lot of those security measures across every campus in the district.
So those safe zones would be on every campus?
Yes, it's, you really want a forward-facing or a front-facing side of the campus where people can come and go, that you have the ability to manage that coming and going. And then you really want the rest of that campus, like when kids go to the playground and whenever they're outside, you want that to be a secure area where not just anyone can walk up. The world is very different than it was when you and I went through school. And now we have to deploy all kinds of security measures to make sure that our kids and staff are safe at all times.
Okay, and then I know that another part of the bond recommendation by the Facilities Corporation or Commission, is it corporation or commission?
It's committee.
Committee, okay,
Facilities
committee.
Advisory Committee.
Facilities Advisory Committee, okay, I want to make sure I have
That's
that
all
right.
right.
So they proposed also, in closing, there's 3 campuses, elementary, that are 2 elementary schools combined essentially, and they have
Right.
walkways. And right now they're open air. So of course, enclosing them would probably, limit, of course, they wouldn't have exposure to the elements, but is that also a security issue, concern, having them open the way they are now?
It is. Most of those areas are secured behind a fence right now, or behind a wrought iron fence. But we still have access where someone who were very interested in grabbing a kid would have access at times. We try to supervise those at all times right now, but for security purposes, and then again for the weather issue, the recommendation was to enclose those areas. Those happen on what we used to call our mega campuses. Clements Parsons, which was the Clements campus and the Parsons campus. Williams Ledger, which was the Williams campus and the Ledger campus. And then at Fairview Jewell, which was the Fairview campus and the Miss Jewell side. Those were all separate campuses at one point. And then we made them what we call mega campuses. And they were connected through covered walkways. And what we would like to do, or what the committee has recommended doing, is just closing in those walkways and making them secure, making them climate controlled and things like that.
And speaking of Fairview Miss Jewell, another portion of the recommendations from the committee was to completely renovate, remind me which side was it?
It's the Miss Jewell side.
Miss Jewell side. And is that the only campus that has not been renovated since it was originally built?
Yes, House Creek's not been, well, House Creek has had a renovation on it. We expanded the cafeteria at one point. But Miss Jewell is probably the only campus we have left that hasn't had significant improvements done to it. Now, there's always been some little things done to it, but that campus, when you start educating kids with modern educational resources and tools, one of the things that we have to have in classrooms now is much more electricity than we used to have. We used to have a plug on every wall. Now, when you have a one-to-one initiative and kids have laptops or iPads or something and they're charging them, then you got to have more power in each of those classrooms than before. We used to use overhead projectors that plugged into an outlet on the wall. Now we have projectors that are ceiling mounted and they're connected to a computer and all those other things where a teacher can provide instructional resources. And so those things all get renovated. The other thing on the Miss Jewell side of Fairview Jewell is when that building was built, it met every code, everything was fine. And as long as you don't touch it significantly, it's okay. But when you start renovating and you make a significant change to the building, you have to go back and make that meet modern code. And so one of the areas over there specifically that's hard for kids. It's not for kids who have mobility and all that, but for kids that may be limited to a wheelchair or a walker, is access to restrooms. Those restrooms don't have very wide corridors. They go in, they have an immediate turn. That corridor's not 4 foot wide, doesn't allow for the turn of a wheelchair or anything like that. And then again, the bathroom stalls in there are not made for modern ADA accessibility. So that's one of the things that we'd like to upgrade. We'd like to upgrade, and part of the bond proposal is to upgrade the HVAC systems, the electrical systems, replace tile and flooring, and then just go in and freshen everything up, paint, doors, all those things, and make sure that it's a modern campus.
And then finally, there would also be a dedicated project at the Cove Junior High as well.
Cove Junior High, we have the same issue at Cove Junior High that we had at House Creek. House Creek was built as a campus that was to house about 600 or 700 kids. And we knew immediately upon opening that school, but one of the challenges we had there was the cafeteria seating area was pretty small. So we went back a few years ago and we expanded that cafeteria eating area so we could have more tables in there for kids, so they're not piled on top of each other. Copperas Cove Junior High School, they had an addition where they put a cafeteria on that. They have a stage, they have a food service prep and serving area. That's all okay. We just need more eating area for those kids. And so the proposal includes an expansion of that eating area and the addition of a boys and girls restroom in the cafeteria, which can be accessed from inside the cafeteria itself. Right now, if a kid comes up to you and you're on duty in the cafeteria and they say, hey, I need to go to the little boys or girls room, we've got to send them out of that cafeteria down a hallway, and then they go down in the 400 hallway and utilize those restrooms. If I don't send a staff member with them, then there are times when we don't have visual supervision of those kids to the bathroom. And so we want to make sure that that's a much more controlled environment, and then we have the ability to monitor students. And so increase the size of that cafeteria, plus provide some restroom access in there. We do have programs in that cafeteria, and we have guests, parents, grandparents, and those folks. Those restrooms would be usable by the adults there as well, which is helpful, because if you're an adult and you're not familiar with the school, and you come up and say, hey, I'm here for Grandparents' Day with my grandchild, is there a restroom I can use? Well, then we've got to either walk them down or tell them how to go and get there. In this case, they would have a restroom that they could access immediately directly out of the cafeteria space.
Okay. And so I just want to also ask this. It wasn't on my proposed list of questions, but I just thought of it. So the Facilities Advisory Committee was formed using basically members of the community, not education related, some of them. Some of them were former students, correct, who had graduated?
They've graduated. We had some high school students who were actually in high school when it started,
Okay.
but they've graduated since then.
And then also some staff members. Did any of the district leadership, yourself or any other like top leadership in the district, have any input into the recommendations?
The committee started when Rick Kirkpatrick was here as our deputy superintendent, and Rick started that work, and really it began as a conversation. What kind of things do you think are out there that we need to pay attention to? What are some of the things that the community would like to see? And then let's begin to back that up with data. So they kind of created a wish list to begin with, or shared thoughts to begin with about what kind of facility needs there were. And those needs have evolved over time. There was a time whenever they said, oh, we need an indoor practice facility. And there were times when they said, oh, we need this or we need that. And so the wishes and wants and needs have evolved over time. Part of that reason is we involved TASB Facility Services, which is Texas Association of School Boards. They have a wing or a department that deals directly with facilities. And so those folks came and did a facility analysis for us. They figured out when every building was built. They figured out when every renovation was done to those buildings. They talked about the age of those facilities. They talked about the capacity of those facilities when they were built and what the capacity would be today. And so Rick facilitated that. Rick Kirkpatrick facilitated those early discussions. Really, we were not in the business because we didn't feel like we were at a point where we could propose, a facilities committee could propose a bond. We were just trying to lay foundational work to say, hey, when the time came, maybe there's an opportunity. And we knew that in August of 2025, the district would pay off their current bonded indebtedness. In August of 2025, we would make our last payment on the 2005 bonds that were issued. So that made it an opportune time to begin to think about a bond issue without as a significant increase in taxes as it would be if we were trying to stack it on top of what already existed. So that committee worked over time. A lot of their early work was spent just visiting facilities, talking about hopes, dreams, and wishes, and then visiting facilities, looking at places, talking to people. And that took a great deal of their time. And then they had a report where the folks from Texas Association of School Boards Facilities Services came out and met with them and went over their report. And then they began to talk to folks like our financial advisor. Hey, what does it look like? What does it cost to do this or do that? And then they talked to architect. Hey, what would that be? Rick left us in the spring, took the job as Florence ISD, and I understand he's doing a good job down there at Florence ISD as superintendent. And so their work kind of went on hold for a few months because we were trying to restaff and do those things. And then I came back to the committee. Rick and the committee had come up with a list of priorities. And they said, hey, we want to talk about this. So whenever we reinitiated that process, I started with that document. And I went back to the committee and I said, folks, tell me what really is real and what is really a dream in here. Tell me what you want. And so we had a couple of meetings where we talked about their findings and their early recommendations. And then we brought back in architects, we brought back in a bond consultant, we hired a company to do a survey for us, a pre-bond survey to talk about what people's public perceptions were and help inform them in that process. And so that's really where the work has taken place. We have never, let me say this on my behalf, I don't think Rick ever did either. I don't think we ever sat down, I know I never have, and I don't think Rick ever did, sat down and say, hey folks, this is what has to be done. We really let that be a committee-driven decision. And we had folks on that committee, as you said, they were community members, they are business owners, we had builders on there, we had construction people on there, we had all kind of folks on there. And their words of caution were, hey, things are getting expensive, it's hard to find crews to put to work, cost escalation is a real deal. And so we tried to heed all that advice, and that resulted in the facility committee doing their work and then coming in the fall, tried to bring that work to culmination. And I can remember one night we were meeting and I just told them, I said, folks, you're going to have to decide what you need to do. And well, Dr. Burns, what do you think? It doesn't matter what Dr. Burns thinks. What it matters is what the committee is willing to support, what the committee is willing to carry to the board. And so the committee was very forthright in that. All we did was help them, put things to paper and clarify that for them. But they've been pretty focused on the work that they've been doing. And you were at State of the District yesterday. You heard J.C. Stubbs, who's a member of that committee, talk about the work that they've done. If you look at the number of committee members and the minimum number of meetings that they would have attended, that committee has put about 1,500 hours worth of work into the recommendations that they brought to the board. It's not been a fly-by-night or a last second or last minute thing. They've been thoughtful and spent a great deal of time, effort, and energy trying to make sure that they got things right.
Okay. And I know, and I'm sure you've probably seen, we've seen a lot on social media of a lot of talks of people think that there either needs to be a replacement high school or a second high school. Kind of some a little bit mixed. I see sometimes a little bit more leaning towards a second high school.
Sure.
But from where the school district sits, factually, is that a feasible option for the school district?
I think that anything is possible. I think do we have the ability to do it? I don't factually think we do. And let me share with you why I say that. Early on in the process, we had a meeting with financial advisor, construction people, and architect. And I have shared this number at a board meeting. And the number was a high school, and the high school is in North Texas, I believe. I think it's Prosper ISD is building a new high school. That high school costs $425 million. Now, Would we build the same high school that Prosper would build? I would doubt that. We would have to build something different. But in talking to our financial advisor, I solicited advice from him, from the builders, from a construction company we work with, and from our architects. And I said, hey, can y'all give me an idea what a high school would cost?
Who is the financial advisor?
Financial advisor is Doug Whitt with Samco Financial Group out of Dallas.
Okay.
And Doug responded and he said, Joe, when you start thinking about a 6A high school, 6A high school without athletic facilities and without CTE facilities, a basic high school with an auditorium, band halls, would run anywhere from 225 on the very low end to $275 million. If you add athletic facilities to it, it depends on what you add. If you add what we've got at the high school, which is a field house and practice fields and a competition gym and those things, prices certainly would be different. If you added a stadium, that would have to be a separate proposition. I don't think Copperas Cove would ever build a $60 million stadium, but there's a lot of money tied up in stadiums. So I think that we would be on the high end of that for a basic high school. And then by the time you add athletic facilities and a CT building, I think you would probably, with cost escalation, add at least another $100,000 to that number. So you would be pushing $375 to $400 million. And that's a lot of money. And we don't have, based on our financial advisor running the numbers. Now, when I say running the numbers, he takes our total taxable value, which is established by the appraisal district in Coryell County, and multiplies that times 50 cents. Because 50 cents is the maximum interest and sinking tax rate that a district can adopt. And at those maximums, if you take our current taxable value and you multiply it times 50 cents, you generate approximately $200 million. That's it.
So that's the bond capacity.
That is the bond capacity of CCISD.
That's the highest bond amount the district could take on at one time.
Now, there are some districts, and I'm going to be very honest with you, that there's some districts that are in high growth areas that go out and they propose bond issues based on future values, and those districts are growing by 30 or 40% of value every year. We are not growing like that. We're growing about 2%, 1.8% or something like that per year. So it wouldn't change a great deal, but in our current situation, approximately $200 million is what Doug Whitt says that we would have the ability to generate.
And that, of course, is below what the financial advisor said would be
the minimum price for a new high school. Yeah. Okay. And the other thing is all you would get would be a high school. You wouldn't get any renovations to any other campus. You wouldn't get security measures. You wouldn't get all those things. And that doesn't include the purchase of land, and that also doesn't include staffing. So let's have a discussion, or let me share with you that we've had people I've seen say, hey, we need to build another high school in addition to, not in lieu of, but just in addition to. Let's build a smaller high school, a 1,500 student campus. The high school takes about 20% of our annual budget just for staffing the high school. So high school staffing costs us, staffing and supplies, cost us about $12 to $15 million a year. If you took that and applied it, because when you build another high school, in addition to the current high school, you're duplicating a number of services. You have to have another head football coach. You have to have another coaching staff. You have to have new department chairs. You have to have new math departments, science departments, history departments, English departments. You're duplicating a lot of services. And so those services would run us probably $10, $12, $15 million a year. Last year, and you've been covering the district for a while, last year the board adopted a $6 million deficit budget on the M&O side. So if you're already $6 million in the hole, where do you come up with this other 10, 12, or $15 million just to staff a new high school and run it? And that's not a one-time cost. That's not a building cost. That is a repetitive cost year in and year out.
Because you have to continue to pay your
employees. You have to continue to pay it. And so it's not that is an astronomical cost, but over 5 years at even $12 million, you're paying $60 million for that. The other thing is cost escalation is a real deal. We were visiting with our bond strategist the other day, and they're doing some bond work with other districts. Cost escalation in those districts are running 1.5% a month, which is 18% a year. So on on $100 million bond, it would be $18 million a year. On a $200 million bond, it would be $36 million a year. So when we look at the bond proposal the Facilities Committee has brought forward, there is really $151 million worth of work, construction work. There's 23 point something million in cost escalation, because a new high school, if you build it from scratch or renovate, it's going to take you at least 2 years to do. So you got to have 2 years of cost escalation. That doesn't buy you another classroom. It doesn't buy you an extra parking place. It doesn't buy you an updated anything. That is just the cost of doing business over time. And so that cost is hard for me to swallow. But I also understand you can't get a company to come in here and guarantee you that they can hold a price for 2 years. They don't even hold a price for 2 years on gasoline, pop or candy bars. I walked into a store the other day when I was traveling back from East Texas and bought a 20-ounce Diet Coke, $3.01. I said, well, how much is your fountain drink? Well, they're $1.19. I believe I'll have a fountain drink then. I don't need the plastic bottle for a 301. But cost escalation is a real piece out there. I will share with you, there was not a committee member and there's not a board member or an employee in this district who would not look at you and say, my gosh, it would be wonderful to have a brand new high school, to have this big, beautiful building sitting somewhere. But there are more needs than just the high school in the district. There are needs at other campuses. And you don't have the ability to raise the money. I think that J.C. Stubbs said yesterday, we'd all love to have a Lamborghini, but you got to be able to pay for what you can drive. And at this point, let's just say $225 million for a high school. Then add your other facilities to it. If they run that up $100 million, you're at $300 million. Cost escalation at the least would be $30 million for that. Folks, I just don't know where you come up with that kind of money. Now, if we win the new lotto and somebody gets that $800 million, we would take a donation and we would be glad to build whatever they would like built. But in reality, and part of the problem is you have districts that have greater property wealth than us and have greater bonding capacity. They just have more money. We're not one of those districts. We're not a property wealthy district. You can go to some of these property wealthy districts and they can generate, Prosperity generated more than $2.7 billion on significantly less tax rate than what we have. But they're different property wealth.
When you're talking about property wealthy areas, are you talking about like maybe areas that have a lot of like big businesses, manufacturing
Typically,
businesses
they have a lot of industry, or they have extreme home values.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who was superintendent in Highland Park in the Dallas area. When she was superintendent there, she couldn't afford to live in the district because the average home value was $2.1 million.
Wow.
Our average home value is about 193. We use the $200,000 mark in the bond to talk about factual information.
Mm-hmm.
But the average home value in Copperas Cove ISD is about 193 million.
Wow.
I'm 193,000, not million, pardon me, 193,000. But that's a long way from 2.1 million.
Right.
For that. And so when you have those kind of taxable values, like there's property wealthy districts around us that they can generate millions upon millions upon millions of dollars on a fraction of a penny because they have that much wealth. And those property wealthy districts get a caveat in the funding formula in that under normal circumstances with their M&O tax rate, if they raise their M&O tax rate, some of those districts are paying as much as 80 cents on the dollar back to the state because they're so wealthy. But under a bond, they don't have to pay anything back to the state. They get to keep every penny raised on the INS side of the tax rate. So they can go in and raise the tax rate by tenths of a penny and generate millions and millions of dollars. We are not one of those. And we're not one of those just simply because we don't have a lot of industry in Coryell County or in CCISD. A lot of ours are service-related businesses. Our average homes are not that expensive, and that makes it a great place to come and raise a family because of affordability. But when you're trying to build facilities, it limits you on what you can do.
Gotcha. And so And again, I know a big sticking point, one way or the other, is going to be the high school on this bond. And will, the what was proposed, will it add to the footprint of the high school? Like, will the building itself be expanded or have a new wing or whatever
It will.
added to it?
It will. And we've got a board over here we can show you in a minute. There is an expansion of the high school that includes 55 new classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And that high school gets flipped to face Avenue D, and that growth on that high school takes place out that way. Our current entrance at the high school, we come out and create an outdoor eating area and then a new cafeteria. So there is more space added to the high school. Not just capacity, but room for kids to get away from each other, where they're not packed on top of each other. We had a discussion with our architect and construction consultant, and our hallways at the high school, you can always make them wider. I'm not saying that they can't be wider, but they exceed the normal operating and design standard for width of hallways. We're in compliance with all of that. It's just we try to funnel our kids through one particular hallway. We call it the quarter-mile hallway over there, the one that goes from Fine Arts Wing all the way to cafeteria. And there's only one way to get to that cafeteria. And so that congests that hallway. If you're going up to the front of the building and you turn that corner into small commons, that is an area that gets clogged. So the goal is to spread those kids out, get them in a dedicated hallway, and let them shuffle within that hallway from their respective core classes. And then the only time they would traverse the campus would be whenever they're going out to fine arts or to athletics.
Okay. And of the $175 million, should it pass and the bonds be issued at that amount, how much of that is going to be for the high school, dedicated to the high school?
About $155 million of that goes to high school. Now, the biggest part of cost escalation is at high school. So the biggest part of that $20 million is at high school because it takes 2 years to get that thing done. If you were building a brand new high school, it would take 2 years to do it. So price escalation hits the high school project significantly because it just takes time to do it. We have to build it while we're flying the plane. Kids still have to come to campus. They still have to be there. We still have to meet their needs, and so it will be done in projects. New cafeteria would be one that would be done early. There's some other things around the high school that we would chip away at, and then we would come in and start on that addition at the front. I don't know exactly the plan of progression for that because the architect doesn't design that. Really, when we hire a construction manager at risk or a general contractor, those would be the folks who would sit down and phase that project. And certainly you would start with the ones that would give you the most relief first, and then you would add through the rest of them.
Okay.
So there's going to be a time of transition. When I was in Lufkin ISD as a principal, we passed a bond issue and built a new high school around an existing junior high with kids attending it. It was exciting at times because you have this core building that looks like a tall stack of pancakes, and all of a sudden you're having to build up around it, put in second floors, and all that. It's interesting to have to do that. Fortunately, we're a single-story building, and we can move kids and create pathways for construction. The only impact that kids would really see would be at times how they enter the campus and exit the campus. It would not significantly impact them in their day-to-day courses. But that's an addition to the high school, and then that's the rest of the high school, just everything being freshened up. All of the classrooms would get new cabinetry and painting and ceilings. We'd have new flooring throughout that building. It would look like a cohesive building. Right now, it looks like a building that was built in 3 or 4 phases. And so the goal is to create a facility that looks like a brand new high school and is all uniform throughout.
Okay. Now I'm going to throw a couple hypothetical situations at you because there are 2 options on the ballot. Yes, no. So hypothetically, if the bond passes, what's the timeline look like?
If the bond passes on May the 4th, then I think that probably by August or September we would be in the process of selling bonds, and we would be in the process of starting some of those initial projects. We have not directed architects or engineers to build out or finish up plans. We don't have a construction ready plan right now because we don't have an approved bond. And we don't want to spend money that may or may not be there. But we have some renderings, and we have some other things, and certainly at the high school, we have a lot of existing building. But a lot of that's gonna have to be renovated. We gotta renovate the electrical. If you remember, a few years ago, we lost a couple of days of school because we blew a fuse, and those fuses aren't made anymore. But we would expect that we would see some easy things come first. I think we'd see those outdoor areas connected at the elementaries. I think we'd see the junior high cafeteria expansion begin. I think we would see something that we talked about as part of the facilities upgrade is playground renovations at elementaries. That would be something that would fall in line. And I think that we would see cafeteria sprout from the ground pretty quick at the high school. And then the rest of the renovation of the high school becomes a little more complicated because it's got to go through design and engineering. High school cafeteria, you're building an open eating area inside, an open eating area outside. The big mechanical and engineering issue is getting all that kitchen stuff right. But you're doing it only for one place. And so I think it's easier to do that for one facility than it is when you have to do it through the whole high school complex. So I think that's our plan. We would certainly communicate that with voters and say, hey, as a result of your approval of this measure, here's what we know projects and how they would work, how they would phase in. If it doesn't pass, to be very honest with you, I don't have a plan B because I didn't bring plan A. Plan A was brought from facilities committee. The board and the committee have not directed me to do anything else. We're putting all of our eggs in one basket, and we're hoping that our voters will support that initiative and that happens. If it doesn't, we'll go back and we'll find something else to look at, or we won't. I really honestly don't know that. I don't know what we would do next. The need does not go away, and the ability to generate revenue doesn't change dramatically, and the cost of a new building doesn't change dramatically. If you put it off another year or two, add another, let's just say that cost escalation is 10%. Add another 17.5 million for every year you put it off. And construction is not getting any cheaper. So I don't have another plan in my pocket to pull out and say, well, if this doesn't happen, then we need to do this. Because I didn't create the first plan. That came from a committee. And we wanted to honor their work. They've been at it a long time. And they've done a great deal of work. Our board has not said, hey, Dr. Burns, if this doesn't work, we want this, this, and this. I think our board would want to honor the work of the committee and go back to them and say, hey, tell us what you could give up and could not give up. You could get down to a small enough high school that you could afford to build one. You could build a high school like they would build in Bruceville Eddy that would have 750 kids. But then all you're doing is duplicating service because you still got to have the big high school to serve all those kids. So I understand people's desire. I want a brand new Dodge truck. Mine has 220,000 miles on it. But I went and looked at the price of that brand new Dodge truck, and I'm not near as in love with that brand new Dodge truck as I thought I was. When they tell me it's $59,000 or $69,000, I say, you know what, that Dodge with 220,000 miles on it looks better every day because it's paid for, and all I do is maintain it. That's it. We're not asking them to maintain something that's not good. We're asking, I think that the ask is for the community to help make what we have better within the confines of the resources we have access to. Now, if someone wins that $800 million and they want to donate a significant chunk of it, we are open to donations. We take them every time. That donation of that size would have to go to the board, but I probably could guarantee you the board would accept it. They would not decline that kind of donation. But that's just part of the reality. We're not in a property wealthy area. Our community is really kind of a bedroom community. A lot of our folks live here but work someplace else. And that's one of the reasons that we sought out additional voting hours and additional voting locations, is because we did a survey pre-bond about that. And what a lot of our prospective voters says is, I have trouble getting to the polls. I work out of Copperas Cove and I cannot make it home by 5 o'clock. So we went and requested with Justin Carruthers to extend voting hours, and we wanted more polling locations, because if you're coming in from on 190 from Belton Temple 35 area and you stop to get groceries at Walmart or HEB, even with an extended voting hour, you may not make it. And so we have an additional polling location that'll set up behind the fueling station on that grassy area there at HEB. And that is for no other reason, just to increase the opportunity for people to be able to vote.
Do you expect a high turnout for the bond election?
It is an off election. It's not on a general election date, but I hope that we have really good voter turnout. I hope that there's a lot of interest. I can't tell you how to vote, but everybody I talk to, I encourage to vote. Let your voice be heard. My mama used to say, if you don't vote, you can't gripe. So I want to be sure and vote, because if it doesn't go my way, I may want to gripe a little bit. But I do think it's a civic responsibility, not a duty. It's a responsibility. And I do think there are a lot of people who don't participate in the process who want to provide input. The best way for you to provide input is to vote. I think that's fundamental. And then whatever happens, happens. But we have a lot of parents who live here, work out of town, and we want to make sure that parents, retirees, whoever they are, have access to the polls. And I visited with Chancellor Carter about this at CTC. I visited with Ryan Haverlaw, our city manager, about this. I visited with Justin Carruthers, the election official in Coryell County, about this. I even visited with Dr. Desi Roberts over in Bell County, their election official, about this. One of the challenges I think that we have in elections is we provide a couple of days of 7 to 7 voting, and then we provide the 7 to 7 voting on election day. Listen, if it can be afforded by the entities, I think we ought to open up. I remember when you used to not be able to vote early unless you had a specific reason that you really had to do an early ballot. I like the early voting because I don't like us tying everything to one day. My mother-in-law had a stroke the end of November. If that had been a voting day for me, I wouldn't have gotten to vote, because I'd have had to go and help take care of her like we did. We never know what's going to happen on any given day. So give me an opportunity to cast my ballot at times that are good for me and in locations that are good for me. And I promise you, I think we will increase voting that way. And we need to increase voting. There's a lot of things that go on in our nation and in our state that probably wouldn't go that way if we had more than 4% of the population vote. I think in the last state election, the primaries, we had like 6% of the voters across the state of Texas vote. It's not a lot of people. And they really kind of determine who gets to vote in November, who's on the ballot.
Yeah. So that's get a little off track there, but I understand. I hear you completely. Voter registration or voter turnout has been very low historically, and especially the last couple of decades. Just wanted to kind of circle back real quick to if the bond is unsuccessful. You said the need does not go away. So some of those smaller ticket items, like the maybe the cafeteria expansion at the junior high, and closing the walkways at the elementary schools, some of those smaller ticket items, is there a potential that the district could go back and look and see how possibly money could be reallocated to make those things happen should it fail?
We've spent about $50 million over the last 10 or 12 years on facility improvements. A lot of that was a result of fund balance that we accrued when we were receiving heavy impact aid in excess of $13 million a year. We're receiving $385,000 a year now of impact aid because we dropped below the threshold of 35% of our students meeting the criteria for impacted students. So the district doesn't have the ability to build a fund balance significantly. Certainly, we're not going to abandon our principles of trying to make sure we have great facilities for our kids and things like that. And we would look for every avenue and opportunity to try to accomplish the work that needs to be accomplished. Even if those were nibbled away, though, I'm going to go back to this issue. If you want to build a new high school, you got to come up with a lot of money. And it's more than we have the ability to bond for, even if that's the only thing on the ticket. Even if that's the only thing. The cafeteria expansion of the junior high is less than $1 million. Fairview Miss Jewel needs renovated. That project is about $15 or $18 million to renovate and tie that together. Right now, we have about a $63 million fund balance. We have to keep 3 months of operating expense in there, period. And our operating expense is about $6 million a month, payroll only. So we try to keep about $40 million in there. So if we funded one of those projects like the renovation of Miss Jewel and a couple of other little things, we would be down to a point where we would be into the quick as far as fund balance goes. And remember, I shared that we adopted a $6 million deficit last year. That has to come out of somewhere. Now we're squeezing every nickel, trying to get a dime, as JC said yesterday. We're trying to bring those costs in. A lot of our costs are associated with an updated pay scale that we adopted for teachers. And we're not ashamed of that. We're very proud of that. We're glad our teachers are paid where they are, and we don't want to back up on that. We have no plan to do that. But we've got to be really prudent with how we spend money, as we always have tried to be. This district, since the inception of the financial integrity rating system, has received the highest rating of superior that's allowed, that's permitted, that you can earn. And we don't want to go back on that. I think our community knows about that, and they expect us to be financially prudent with the kind of things that we do. Unfortunately, we just don't have unlimited resources to do all that. But we would continue to work really hard to try to make a difference in a positive way for our kids and our community.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Burns, I appreciate it. Those were the main questions I had. And
well, we appreciate you. If there's anything that we can ever help you with, or we can answer questions about, Curtis or I are just a step away. There's a lot of things that we can share. If I weren't on school time and in school uniform, which I'm always under school time, it seems like 24/7. But, it's helpful for people to understand the facts in context. I've had a parent reach out to me, or a community member reach out to me and say, Dr. Burns, why would we recommend updating an old high school? Well, we have a building that was built in 1896 that we updated. We didn't abandon it. We updated it, and we used that for for Crossroads High School. Our buildings have good bones, and if I can find a way to do it less expensive, more affordable, and on a tighter timeline, then we're going to do our very best to do that. And when it's out of reach, I think it's incumbent upon us to be honest with our taxpayers and our community and say, folks, absent a windfall of some type, that apple is just not within reach for us. And it's not that I dislike those people's opinion or dislike an individual who says, hey, we need a new high school. I'm there. I'd love to have a brand new high school. It'd be beautiful to have a brand new high school, but it's just not within our reach to afford it now. I have 4 boys. My wife and I worked a long time to be where we are with our home and all those other things. And our boys will look and say, Dad, I'd love to have a 4-bedroom home and all that. You will one day. But you have to get to the point where you can have enough earning capacity to do that. The district is not limited in what it can dream about. It is limited on what it can afford. And so what we've tried to do is provide the affordable option.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I appreciate it. And, hopefully this is enough information for people to digest and to make a decision one way or the other at
we
the
would
ballot
encourage people,
box.
If they have questions, reach out to us. Go to CCISD's website and go to the Bond 2024. There is a lot of information out there that is factual that our bond counsel has looked at it and said, hey, when we started that, we had a couple of adjectives in there about our staff. And she said, you take those out. That's subjective stuff. You take it out. It has to be absolutely objective, non-political. We did that. So the information that's out there we have a communications document out there. We have factual information that goes up. And so we're posting what we can post legally because we can't advocate. The school cannot. And so I've had a couple of people. I had a retired educator tell me, Dr. Burns, I want you to know I'm frustrated because I want to know exactly how you feel about this. I can't tell you on school time personally how I feel about that because it would be advocating. I can tell you the facts. So she said, okay, I want to take you to dinner. My husband and I want to take you to dinner and I want you to tell us. Well, I would tell them kind of the same thing I've told you. We can't build what we can't afford. And the proposal that the facilities committee's brought forth is reasonable, it's prudent, and it's cost effective. We can do that. Are there a lot of other options out there? You bet. You know, I would love to have marble tile to my whole house. Not really. I'm not a marble tile person, but you got to be able to afford it. And so, I do think it's important to, from my perspective, to honor people's work. And when people have been willing to commit time, more than 1,500 hours, speak with everybody that they could speak with that knew anything about that, I think that there comes a time when you have to say, you know, I appreciate those people's work. I want to honor their work. Doesn't mean I agree with them. It doesn't mean I'm going to vote for or against the bond. But at least I've got to honor their work, that they have some more insight than I do. And they have probably more insight than I do. But that's where we are. And we will do whatever our public desires for us to do. Now, I'm not going to do what any one individual says we need to be doing. It needs to be consensus based, but we're going to do the best we can with the resources we've been provided. And we hope that everybody understands that.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Thank you.